Here now, what I'll do is exit out of this window here. Because if I don't, it's going to have some background stuff going on. There we go. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm Brother Doug. With my brothers and sisters here today at the Wigan by Yahuwah Assembly. And we are going to be doing our usual Sabbath day study. Let me just fix something real quick. Got a lot of here. All right. All right, there we go. Now everything's fixed. Okay. So I'm going to start us off. I'll be using my net of the LXX, the net version of the Septuagint here for Deuteronomy 12. So here we go. Deuteronomy chapter 12. And these are the ordinances. Now, let me just see. I might have to. I think we got a little bit of background noise going on here. So let me just fix that. Okay. There we go. Deuteronomy 12. And these are the ordinances and right rulings that you shall be watchful to perform in the land that Yahuwah, the Elohim of your fathers, is giving you as allotment all the days that you live on the earth. So basically your whole life, right? You know how Paul says in Romans 7, as long as someone lives, the law has dominion over them as long as they live. Okay. See, you shall with destruction destroy all the places there where the nations whom you are about to dispossess serve their mighty ones on the high mountains and on the dunes and beneath every leafy tree. So they are basically being commanded here to destroy the high places and the idols of the nations that they are dispossessing. And you shall chop down their altars, smash their stels, whatever that means. Sacred stones. Okay, so Asherah poles, I guess. All right. Okay, their groves. Okay, groves will actually be the Asherah poles. Okay, so sacred stones or pillars cut down. Their groves, Asherah poles. I think the stones would actually be the sun pillars. Burn with fire the carved objects of their mighty ones and blot out their name from that place. You shall not do so to Yahuwah your Elohim, but the place which Yahuwah your Elohim may choose in one of your tribes, you designate that his name be called there, you too will seek and enter there. Now, what the reason I sometimes like paraphrase Bibles, I'm going to show you guys something interesting here from the NLT in that same verse that I just read in Deuteronomy 12. I'm going to show you something here. This is why sometimes I like paraphrase Bibles. Verse 4 here. Do not worship Yahuwah your Elohim in the way these pagan peoples worship their gods. So that's why I sometimes like a paraphrase Bible. Because you'll see these literal word for word Bibles will just say, do not do so to Yahuwah. And it kind of just, it's very generalized and it's not really explaining what that is referring to. Okay, so verse 5, but the place which Yahuwah your Elohim may choose in one of your tribes to designate that his name be called there, you will also seek and enter there. So this later on would be, obviously it's the tabernacle right now when he's giving out these commands, but later on this would be known as the temple in Jerusalem, the place where he put his name. Mm-hmm. And some could make the argument Jerusalem as well as where he put his name. So, you okay, Mom?
Yeah, I'm fine.
You will bring there your whole burnt offerings and your sacrifices, your first fruits and your votive offerings, your freewill gifts, and the firstlings of your oxen and sheep. And you shall eat there in the presence of Yahuwah your Elohim, and shall rejoice in all things to which you put your hands, you and your household, as Yahuwah your Elohim has baruched you. So again, all these offerings they had to bring to the place Yahuwah put his name. You shall not do all the things that we are doing here today, each one doing what is pleasing before him. For you have not come until now into the rest and into the inheritance that Yahuwah your Elohim has given you. Kind of a reference. We see Hebrews, I believe it's 8, give a reference to this, that if Yahusha would have given them rest, referring to Yahusha, son of Nun. Okay. And you shall cross over. You shall cross over the Jordan and live in the land that Yahuwah your Elohim is allotting to you. And he will give you rest from all your enemies around. You will live in safety. And it shall be that place wherever Yahuwah your Elohim may choose for his name to be called there, there you will bring all that I command you today. Your whole burnt offerings and your sacrifice and your tithes and the first fruit of your hands and your gifts and every choice one of your gifts, whatever you may vow to Yahuwah your Elohim, you shall be joyful before Yahuwah your Elohim, you and your sons and your daughters, your male and female slaves, and the Levite who is at your gates, since he has no part or allotment with you. Okay, so again, it's talking about bringing all these offerings to where Yahuwah's name is put, okay, to the place that he has his name, and you are to share, while you're being joyful, you are to share with, obviously, your sons, your daughters, your male and female slaves, the Levite. Obviously, the Levite has no inheritance. That's why you're sharing the festival tithes and all that. I believe this is what that's talking about in verse 12. There is like the Feast of Tabernacles. They would bring like a festival tithe and like share with the community, including the Levite, because the Levite doesn't have anything, right? All the Levite has is Yahuwah. That's it. You know, his inheritance is the temple and Yahuwah. That's about it. And that would also include before the temple, the tabernacle was like the Levites' portion. The sacrifices. That's really about it. Go ahead, brother Yahusha.
This verse 10, it really looks like Yahuwah would have, had they obeyed and had they been diligent, because not only when they went in, you had two problems. You had one where some of them were not being obedient, and then two, you have some that just were not willing to, just not just sit there. They would just sit there instead of actually going and taking the land that Yahuwah had given them. I think the book of Yahusha mentions that. But verse 10, and you shall cross over the Yarden and shall dwell in the land which Yahuwah our Lua takes as an inheritance for you, and he shall give you rest from all your enemies round about, and you shall dwell safely. So I know that you said, Hebrews talks about if Yahusha had given them rest, um, and we know he didn't. But right here, verse 10, it seems that Yahuwah was willing to give them the rest. They just didn't receive it
Yep.
because of their own shortcomings.
And to add to your point, that's what actually Paul's saying in Hebrews 8. If the viewers and listeners actually look at the whole context of the chapter, real quick to show you what we're talking about here. If you go to Hebrews 8, he literally says he found fault with the people. Not that there was a problem with the covenant, but there was a problem with the people. So the reason Yahusha Bar Nun wasn't able to give them rest, it wasn't his fault. It was really the rebellious Israelites' fault. Let's see. All right, so page 717 here.
We're in Hebrews.
Trying to see here.
Where
Yeah,
in Hebrews is it?
Hebrews 8, I think it is. Where it talks about there still remains a rest and all that. Let's see here. I'm just trying to find Hebrews in my NLT here. They have it like for some reason very late into it. Let's see, page 727. Let's see here. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so chapter 8. So it says here, let's see where it gets to the point. Um, so it says here, if the first had been faultless, by the way, covenant, it's not in the text, just to let you know, verse 7. It's not in the text, it's not in the Greek. The covenant's not there. And it's actually talking about priesthood if you look at the context. If the first priesthood had been faultless, there would have been no need for a second to to replace it. But when Elua found fault with the people, he said, "Fault with the people." It's not that the priesthood even had a problem; it's the people. The day is coming, says Yahuwah, when I will make a new covenant with the people of Yashrael and Yehuda. Yashrael and Yehuda are the people of the new covenant. This covenant will not be like the one I made with your ancestors when I took them by the hand and led them out of the land of Egypt. They did not remain faithful to my covenant. Again, they, the rebellious Israelites, were not faithful to my covenant. So I turned back on them, says Yahuwah. But this is the new covenant I will make. Uh, I will put my laws in their minds and I will write them on their hearts. I will be their Elu and they will be my people. They will not need to teach their neighbor nor need to teach their relatives, saying, "You should know Yahuwah, for everyone from the least to the greatest will know me already." Okay, so let me see here. Where does it talk about? Maybe I got the wrong chapter. Let me see here.
Yeah, because this one seems to say um, that the first covenant had fault in it at verse 7.
Yeah, covenant is not in the text though.
Oh, that's what you said. Okay.
Yeah, the Greek, like if you look into like Thayer's or Strong's, that word's not there. They actually add that in there. And if you look at the whole chapter, it's actually talking about priesthood. It's talking about literally it starts off by talking about how we have such a better high priest in the beginning of the chapter. So yeah, that added word there confuses people.
What about reading it in context with verse 6 though?
Yeah, let's see.
Because
But
covenant
now
is there.
Yahusha, our high priest, has been given a ministry that is far superior to the old priesthood, for he is the one who mediates for us a far better covenant with Lulua based on better promises. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
Verse 6, it does have covenant in it. It says he is the mediator of a better
okay,
diatheke, a disposition arrangement, a compacted covenant.
okay, yeah, but the verse 7 is the one that doesn't have it there. So, like
No,
right,
I get
yeah,
that, but reading it in the context of verse 6 is talking about he is the mediator of a better covenant. For if that first had been faultless,
oh,
then
okay,
should no place have been sought for a second.
oh, okay, I see what you're saying. All right, yeah, okay. Let me see here. I want to look at the verse though. I could have swore Hebrews 8 talks about the rest thing. Let me see here. Um, talks about there still remains a rest.
Maybe it's verse chapter 4.
Yeah, it is actually. Now I'm remembering. Yeah, 4:11 or something like that. Yeah. All right. So my bad about that, guys. But it's important that we went through that anyway. Um. Uh, okay. Let's see here. So it says
4:1.
Yeah. Um, let's see here. So Alua's promise of entering his rest still stands, so we ought to tremble with fear, as some of you might fail um, to experience it. For this tube news that Alua has prepared, this rest has been announced to us just as it was to them. It's an important verse there, showing that it's the Basora that was preached to them um, to Paul is the same Basora that was preached in the Tanakh, basically. But it did them no too because they did not share the faith of those who listened to Alua, for only we who believe can enter his rest. And as for the others, Alua said, in my anger I took an oath, they will never enter my place of rest. Even though this rest has been ready since he made the world, we know it is ready because of the place in the scriptures where it mentions the seventh day. On the seventh day, Alua rested from all his work. But in the other passage, Alua says, they will never enter my place of rest. So Alua's rest is there for people to enter, but those who first heard this tube news failed to enter because they disobeyed Alua. So Alua set another time for entering his rest at that time, and that time is today. Alua announced this through Daud much later in the words already quoted. Today, when you hear his voice, don't harden your hearts. Now, if Yahusha had succeeded in giving them this rest, Alua would not have spoken about another day of rest still to come. So there's a special rest still waiting for the people of Alua, for all who have entered into Alua's rest have rested from their labors, just as Alua did after creating the world. And obviously, basically Paul is trying to iterate here that there's still a Sabbath, is what he's trying to iterate. And I know some people will interpret that meaning that we rest now in JC. That's not what the chapter is saying. It's saying that we still have to enter into his rest and learn from basically these examples of disobedience. That's the point of what Paul's bringing about. He's saying because they didn't have faith in them, they weren't able to enter his rest. Wasn't that oh well because it didn't work for them that now we don't need to do it. Like I know how some Christians would interpret this. That's not what it's saying. It's actually saying there's still a Sabbath. Actually, if you look at the verse 11 in the Greek where it says remains a rest, the word for rest in the Greek is sabbatismos, literally means Sabbath keeping, literally. So so it would have been translated a lot better by saying, so there remains a Sabbath keeping for Yahuwah's people. So anyway, go ahead, brother Yahusha.
It definitely seems to have more than just the physical act of entering the rest. That's there, I agree, but it definitely seems to um, verse 6 it says, seeing therefore it remains that some must enter therein, and they to whom it was first preached entered not in because of unbelief. It's just interesting that it uses unbelief instead of disobedience. We know they were breaking the Shabbats, throughout the wilderness, and he had to keep reminding them, like, keep my Shabbat. I'm just curious as to why it uses unbelief, though.
Yeah,
Um,
I think the ISR is they're mistranslating that verse there because I'm noticing other versions say disobedience. The NLT says disobeyed in verse 6. So I'm wondering if they're
the Greek word is obstinacy, obstinate opposition to the divine will,
yeah, that's definitely disobedience. That's like
obstinate and rebellious.
Yep.
yes.
Right.
So the NLT I would definitely take over the ISR there. I would definitely take their translation of that word over what just from what you read from the Strong's, the NLT definitely has
I
a better.
would say further on when you get into the prophets, I think he says, my your new moons, your Shabbats, your feast days, your offerings, these things I've hated. So we even see them like keeping the Shabbat, but still walking in rebellion and disobedience.
Yeah.
So there has to be it has to be more than just like, you know, keeping the Shabbat. It has to be like everything, like coming in and keeping the Shabbat in obedience and, surrender to Yahusha.
Hmm. Well, historically, to add to your point, at that point in time, especially in the first century when he came, that's what they were doing. They were um, they were doing all the ritualistic things, like ceremonial things of the law, but anything to do with your character, the inside, was omitted in their daily activities. Like basically, they were trying to do these outward expressions of certain things in the law, but then when it came down to abstaining from sexual morality, abstaining from moral things of the law, that's when they were constantly breaking it. And like, obviously they probably had idols at that time too, I would think. Israel obviously was in a bad state in the first century. They probably had idols. They probably did this, did that. Kind of like what we're seeing today. Like everyone wants to be like a weekend warrior, but then
Right, that's right.
when you go back to your regular work week, the same sins we keep falling for, we keep getting surrounded by the same temptations, falling for the same sins. And so I think that's always been Israel's problem, is not necessarily the ceremonial things. I don't even like to categorize it as that, but I'm just saying they Israel's main problem really wasn't necessarily the feasts or the Sabbaths or this or that. It was always like the matters that had to do with the heart.
That's right.
That's always been Yahuwah's people's problem,
Mhm.
because yeah, they'll keep the feast, they'll do this, they'll do that. But throughout Israel's whole history, did they care for their orphans? Did they care for their widows? Did they do this? Did they do that? They were failing in a lot of the moral stuff, a lot of the stuff that had to do with the heart. They, I also think they lacked mercy too, if I'm not mistaken, at that time. They were ready to, stone a woman without even having witnesses. Um, they didn't have the higher matters of the Torah either for most of their history. Um, and so yeah, they were definitely being partial in the Torah. It definitely has to be, like you said, more than just keeping the Sabbath. Um, and I'm pretty sure there was other things too. Like we see in Ezra's time period, they didn't want to release their brothers from debt. They they
Mhm.
they were not wanting to keep the what is it called, the Jubilee law. They didn't want to do that.
Mhm.
So there was a lot of things that they were partial with the law. They
Mhm.
they they cared more about the ceremonial things, the tithing of the mint, the cumin, this and that, and they put aside the higher matters. Um, especially when you talk about releasing your brother from debt, that's a higher matter. When if you're constantly breaking, the top 10 other than the Sabbath, that's higher matters. What's the point of keeping a Sabbath to Yahuwah if you have idols in your life? What's the point, um, you know, of of doing any of those feasts in the appointed times if you have other areas in your walk that you need to work on that are higher matters? So yeah, I definitely think that was always their problem. And faith in general, I think they definitely lacked in faith, but also in disobedience. And you know, they didn't trust you who at certain times, and that trust turned into disobedience, like just a belief of its own. If they weren't trusting in Yahuwah, then they weren't willing to have to go through a little hunger. They weren't willing to have to go through a little thirst. Um, Throughout their whole history, they just whenever a little bit of adversity came, they kind of crumbled because there was no faith there. And, so yeah, I think that's what Paul's talking about in Hebrews 4. Um, and I do think you could spiritualize the rest as well, like resting in Messiah. I definitely think resting, you can even talk about how their rest was part of their rest was actually to enter into that land because everything was done for them. You could even interpret the rest being referred to as them resting in the land of Canaan. I mean, what did they really have to do? They had crops already grown for them, and they for their first couple years in the land, they really didn't even have to farm much if they would have made it in there. If all the first generation would have made it in there. Um, so I mean, there's a lot of ways to take that. What he could be talking about, how Yahushua was not able to, have them enter into that rest. Um, I mean, the physical Sabbath keeping is very obvious from like verses 7. I mean, verses 4 to 7. There, it's very obvious. Um, so yeah, but anyway, yeah, very very important topics there. Um, so let's see, going back to Deuteronomy 12 here, verse 14. You shall offer your whole burnt offerings. There you shall do everything I command you today. Yet at your desire, every desire you shall slaughter and eat meat, and according to the barakah of Yahuwah your Eluah, which Yahuwah has given you within any city, the unclean one among you, and clean together shall eat of it. Now, again, I like how the Septuagint puts it. How it says the clean and unclean among you shall eat it. It gives you a context. Now, I think the Masoretic versions will just say the unclean and clean you shall eat it, which kind of confuses people. People that are new to Torah, I could see people thinking that and saying, "Well, see, we could eat clean and unclean meat." No, that's not what it's saying. It's talking about within Israel, you would have had people that were ceremonially clean and unclean at certain times, and Yahuwah is saying whether you're ceremonially clean or unclean, you can eat of the gazelle and the deer and all that. That's what he's saying. So hopefully that explains that there. They would gazelle or deer. The blood, however, you shall not eat. You shall not pour it out on the ground like water. You shall not be able to eat within your cities the tithe of your grain and of your wine and of your oil, the firstborn of your oxen, your sheep, and all the votive gifts that you may be vowed of your agreements. Ned, why you do that? Just leave it as oaths or vows. Like
Right.
what agreements? Come on, I'm sorry, that's a little too generalized there. That they might have a misunderstanding of what an oath is. An oath is not just an agreement. So I disagree with that translation there. And the first fruits, because a oath is like you're promising something. An oath is very similar to a covenant. So I not a fan of how they translate that word there. Go ahead, brother Yahusha.
I know that in the past I would say an oath would be it would have to be backed up with an offering. Um, at least that would be my current thought. What's your thoughts?
Um, Definitely within the Levitical priesthood, definitely I would say, yeah. According to what this scripture is saying too, it says that it's talking about their vow offerings, it's their gifts. You may vow and your agreements, your first fruits of your hands. It seems like, yeah, what you're saying here is what uh verse 17 is saying. So I would say that most of the time, maybe not every time when you do a vow or an oath, usually it did come with an offering, or at the minimum, like an oath in general is a promise. When you make a vow, you vow something, or it's like a definite promise. It's like I am going to do this. I promise I'm going to do this. That's an oath or a vow. So
Now, the difference between an oath to man versus an oath to Yahuwah.
well, I don't know if an oath to man required offerings. I don't see that in scripture. So I would say the biggest difference is that usually when men vowed something to each other, they really didn't, have to give an offering to accompany that. Where usually if you're vowing something to Yahuwah, you're giving up something. Even with Hannah in those situations, right? She vows her son. She of herself promises that her son would be a Nazarite. So even though it's not a spiritual offering, it is a spiritual offering. I meant to say, even if it's not a physical sacrifice, that's a spiritual sacrifice. She's essentially giving her firstborn as a spiritual offering to Yahuwah, if you understand what I'm saying. So that was part of the vow. So that's literally you have a spiritual sacrifice accompanying a vow to Yahuwah versus if I vow something to my mom, there's nowhere in scripture that says I would have to give her an offering. I mean, she's not a deity I'm worshiping. So there's definitely a distinction. There's definitely it might be both promises technically. They're the same as far as how you would do a vow, how you would do a promise, how you would take an oath. But it, with humans, you're not giving sacrifices. Um, Yahuwah usually would require giving up something if you're taking a vow or this or that. Usually, usually it would have to accompany a vow or an oath to Yahuwah at some point in time. Maybe not right away, but eventually, you would give votive offerings, vow offerings, this and that. So I say that's the only distinction I can really make that makes it different. Um, Also, obviously, you're vowing something to Yahuwah. It's 10 times worse if you break it, obviously. Because if you break a vow to Yahuwah, technically you're breaking one of the top 10 commandments by bringing his name to vanity or nothing in that context. So if I break a vow between me and my mom, is it equal sin as if I broke a vow to Yahuwah? Not really. So, not saying you should do either. I'm just putting that out there. I'm not saying you should do either, but I would say the level of sin is definitely different. Um, I would say it's 10 times worse to break a promise that you made to Yahuwah. So, that's the best way I could explain that. Is that a new hand or old hand, brother? Oh, okay.
Oh, that's right.
No, it's all right, bro. No worries. So you may vow in your oaths and the fruits of your hands, but these you shall eat in the presence of Yahuwah your Elua at the place which Yahuwah your Elua may choose you, and your son and your daughter, your male slave and your female slave, and the guest in your cities, and you shall be joyful in the presence of Yahuwah your Elua in all things where you have put your hand. Now, I'm wondering if there's a specific context to that. I do think it's talking about a specific festival there in verse 18. It's either what I would assume it's either talking about tabernacles as the festival that's being referenced here about being joyful. It could be referencing tabernacles or Pentecost, because one of those, I think both of them really part of the commandments for some of these feasts were to be joyful, to rejoice, and all that. I would have to go back to see if trumpet says that, but I know tabernacles definitely does. Um, let's see here. Take care for yourself lest you neglect the Levite all the time that you may live in the land. Key phrase there, in the land. Um, and again, no Levites today. Again, so that's obviously a commandment that pertains to a specific priesthood there. Um, Now, if Yahuwah your Elua enlarges your borders As he has said to you, you shall say, I am going to eat meat. If your soul desires to eat meat, in every desire of your soul, you shall eat meat. But if the place Yahuwah your Elua may choose for his name to be called there is rather far away from you, then you shall slaughter from your oxen and your sheep, that Elua may give you as I have commanded you. Then you shall eat within your cities according to the desire of your soul. This is a perfect example to show there's a difference between killing an animal for food in Torah versus a sacrifice. So I hope everyone's seeing this in this chapter. When you're not giving a sacrifice, you're just eating the animal to eat it. You can eat it within your cities. You can slaughter it within your own home, your own house, and eat it. With sacrifices, you can't do that. Like the whole burnt offerings, the peace offerings, salvation offerings, they had to take it to the tabernacle, to the temple, slaughter the animal at the entrance of the tabernacle or the temple, then bring it to the priest. So what I'm trying to say is when we look at biblically what a sacrifice is, it is, you can't even compare it to just killing an animal for food. It's completely different. It's important to see that. So if you're just eating an animal for food, you can kill it in your own cities, eat it in your own cities. Just as the gazelle is eaten and the deer, so you shall eat it. The unclean one among you and the clean alike shall eat it. Again, it's talking about ceremonial cleanness and all that. Take great care not to eat blood, because its blood is the life's in the blood. The life shall not be eaten with the meat. You shall not eat it. You shall pour it out on the ground like water. You shall not eat it, so that it may go well with you and your sons for you. My bad, after you. If you do what is true and pleasing before Yahuwah your Elua, but when you have taken your set apart things, whatever you may have in your votive offerings, you shall come to the place which Yahuwah your Elua may choose for himself, for his name to be called there. And you will make your whole burnt offerings, the meat you will offer on the altar of Yahuwah your Elua, but the blood of your sacrifices you will pour at the base of the altar of Yahuwah your Elua, but the meat you shall eat. So again, very distinctive what the difference between a sacrifice and meat that you would eat as just a regular animal you kill for food. Keep and hear, and you will do all the words that I command you, so that it may go well with you and your sons forever, if you do what is true and pleasing before Yahuwah your Elua. Now, if Yahuwah your Elua utterly destroys from before you the nations among which you may enter to inherit their land, and you dispossess them and live in their land, take care to yourself lest you seek to follow them after they have been utterly destroyed from before you. You shall not seek their mighty ones, saying, how do these nations act towards their mighty ones? I will do the same. You shall not do thus to Yahuwah your Elua, for the abominations to Yahuwah which he hates they have done for their mighty ones. For they burn their sons and their daughters in the fire to their mighty ones. Every word that I command you today, this you shall be watchful to perform. You shall not add to it nor take away from it. One of the most important verses of this chapter. Do not add to his law or take away from it. Yep. So, yep, this chapter is a very important chapter when you talk about how to worship Yahuwah and all that. I remember the first time I read this chapter, that definitely sealed it up for me with the Christmas thing. He hates what they have done to their mighty ones. It's an abomination to him. Abomination is like the closest word you're gonna ever see to like malice, or like Yahuwah like hating something so much it makes him disgusted.
Strongest word that we really have.
So Yeah, so definitely it's definitely a tube chapter for those out there that are still struggling to come out of all these holidays. Um, it's definitely a serious matter. He hates those things. So yeah, yeah. Oh, go ahead, brother Yahusha. I see you got your hand up.
The interesting little point, verse 30, where it says, how these nations act with their mighty ones. That word act is poyo, or however you say that, poyeo, something. Um, it seems like it can mean different things, but the majority of times it's used, it seems to make or do, um, meaning to make or to bring forth. So it's almost like it's talking about, um, how do these nations bring forth their mighty ones, or how do they, um, make their mighty ones?
That's very interesting. Yeah, I could see that, and actually, to an extent, um, I would say to an extent, the Christian church has actually done that. They brought forth images and mighty ones like the nations, like they have, you know, just basically the whole religion system that originated from them is all about mighty ones of the nations and bringing forth mighty ones of the nations and recycling them. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. And I think we read a couple of weeks ago, right, in Deuteronomy 4, one of the first things Yahuwah says was, "You did not see an image on the mountain."
That's
like,
right.
like
That's right.
first thing he says, he's like, "Don't make an image of me. Don't think you know what I look like. Stop it. Don't do it." You know. So, you know, um, you know, I wonder where they would have started doing that, making images, trying to figure out what Yahuwah looks like. Because you really don't see that until like we only have modern evidence of that with like the Christian imagery.
He looks like this woolly haired guy that's super buff and like coming from Dragon Ball Z, like the the BHI artwork comic version. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think the Father Time stuff definitely, though. I think the Romans would have started with that whole thing, and then when the Catholic Church took over, they took Saturn and pretty much just pre-purposed him as quote unquote God the Father. Because you know the famous painting mom of Michelangelo, he made the whole the two fingers meeting, the finger of Adam supposedly touching the finger.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
When you look at like the image they use for Yahuwah there, it goes right back to Kronos and goes right back to Saturn. Like they're not even hiding who that is. Because that Kronos always had a very long white beard. Um, he had a sickle, which I find interesting. They try to make Reapers out to be the evil guys, even though Yahusha's messengers are the Reapers. So again, they try to make you have a almost like a bastardized look on a Reaper in general, which Reapers are basically those that are gathering out the stumbling blocks. The righteous messengers are the reapers. So society has painted a bad picture about that, and but they give Father Tom usually has that like white long beard with a sickle in his hand, you know, and all that. So, but the I think that's where they got the whole God the Father image in Christianity. They took Kronos or Saturn and pretty much uh, repurposed them or repurposed him, I should say. Um, I don't know when the Hebrews would have really though had that. I can't find anything back into the BC time period where they would have been doing that. Um, I'm wondering I'm wondering if they didn't start doing that really until like the first century or later on. Because you really don't see that. Other than they try to mix Baal worship with Yahuwah worship, and at some point they even deceived themselves to thinking Ashtaroth was Yahuwah's wife or whatever. Um, that's mainly their one of their biggest problems was mixing. Um, they always wanted to mix. They couldn't just have the pure worship of Yahuwah that we just see here in Deuteronomy 12. They had to mix it. It was, and so yeah. And what's weird too is that you kind of wonder if they would have took over all those nations and killed all those nations he wanted them to kill, would they have gotten into Baal worship?
Mm.
And if they would have done the right thing and not made covenants with any of those nations and did what Yahuwah told them to do, possibly they would have not had such a bad apostate state later on, and you know so that pretty much was the beginning of their fall when they started making covenants with them. They were allowing the Canaanites to live in the land still. They were doing this,
Right,
doing that,
exactly.
and
Yep.
and that was kind of like the precursor to their apostate state. In later generations, they by the time you get to the time of First, Second Kings, they're already apostate at that point. They're they're already at the end of their covenant with Yahuwah. Yahuwah at that point is like basically he knows he's going to divorce them soon after. He's kind of just waiting for David's lineage to have the kings and all that, and he's kind of waiting to divorce them at that
Mhm.
point. Because once you get to Jeremiah, they're the bill of divorce already happens. So yeah, well, yeah, something to think about if they would have just done the simple thing and utterly wiped out those tribes.
Mhm.
But yeah. Yeah, so let's see here. I think we're at just
13.
we're at 13 here. Mom, would you like to read?
Sure, sure. Okay, this is about worshiping other mighty ones. Let's get there.
Yep, go ahead.
If a prophet or one who foretells tells by dreams appears among you and announces to you a miraculous sign or wonder, and if the sign or wonder of which he has spoken takes place, and he says, let us follow other mighty ones you have not known, and let us worship them. You must not listen to the word of that prophet or dreamer. Yahuwah your Elohim is testing you to find out whether you love him with all your heart and with all your soul. It is Yahuwah your Elohim you must follow, and him you must revere. Keep his commands and obey him. Serve him and hold fast to him. That prophet or dreamer must be put to death because he preached rebellion against Yahuwah your Elohim, who brought you out of Egypt and redeemed you from the land of slavery. He has tried to turn you from the way Yahuwah your Elohim commanded you to follow. You must purge the evil from among you. If your very own brother or your son or daughter, or the wife you love, or your closest friend secretly entices you, saying, let us go and worship other mighty ones that neither you nor your fathers have known, mighty ones of the peoples around you, whether near or far, from one end of the land to the other. Do not yield to him or listen to him. Show him no pity. Do not spare him or shield him. You must certainly put him to death. Your hand must be the first in putting him to death, and then the hands of all the people. Stone him to death because he tried to turn you away from Yahuwah your Elohim, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Then all Yashrael will hear and be afraid, and no one among you will do such an evil thing again. If you hear it said about one of the towns Yahuwah your Elohim is giving you to live in, that wicked men have arisen among you and have left the people of their town to pray, saying, let us go and worship other mighty ones you have not known. Then you must inquire, probe, and investigate it thoroughly. And if it is true, and it has been proved that this detestable thing has been done among you, you must certainly put to the sword all who live in that town. Destroy it completely, both its people and its livestock. Gather all the plunder of the town into the middle of the public square and completely burn the town and all to Yahuwah your Elohim. It is to remain a ruin forever, never to be rebuilt. None of those condemned things shall be found in your hands, so that Yahuwah will turn from his fierce anger. He will show you mercy, have compassion on you, and increase your numbers, as he promised on oath to your forefathers. Because you obey Yahuwah your Elohim, keeping all his commands that I am giving you today, and doing what is right in his eyes.
Mhm. Mhm. This is a good chapter to show people that want to say that humans were never used as offerings. Really, 'cause I see right in this chapter. What does it say? It says you are to kill the whole city,
Yep,
and he's calling it an offering.
that's right.
So what Yahusha did technically, humans can be offerings. So I kind of point this when a lot of these new non-New Testament Hebrews out there, they like to say, "Oh well, like he couldn't do what he did, and humans are never supposed to be offerings." Really, I can find plenty of examples, even though this is not exactly the same thing as Yahusha offering himself up. The point is that humans are to turn away Yahuwah's wrath. There are humans that are the wicked are used as an offering. So that concept, um, a lot of people don't realize that concept that actually humans in general can be used as an offering. Um, so just something to keep in mind when people say to us, "Oh, well, the Torah doesn't say a human can sacrifice himself as an offering or this and that." You know, so that's what came to my mind when I saw that, and it's calling the slaughtering of the reprobate town a offering. And it literally says it in verse 15, you must attack that town and completely destroy all its inhabitants as well as the livestock. Then you must pile all the plunder in the middle of the open square and burn it. Burn the entire town as a burnt offering to Yahuwah your Elohim. So anyway, so I thought that was interesting. What I really like about this chapter is this gives us the concept we need to be careful what um someone brings to us prophetically, and not just that, you know, it says that some among you may cause you to worship another mighty one. And so this is where we get the idea in Deuteronomy 13. You got to be careful what doctrines people are bringing you, because they could be deceived themselves into worshiping another mighty one, or a version of Yahuwah that's a counterfeit Yahuwah that's in their minds. So I think this is why the oneness thing is important. This is why I harp on the oneness thing. Because if you don't believe in the oneness, by extension, you're believing in another deity. And the reason I say that is if you believe Yahusha, for example, there's people out there that believe Yahusha is just a created being, Yahuwah's Yahuwah, Yahusha's Yahusha. That's, I would say that's a whole different mighty one.
Yeah.
Than what scripture shows.
Yeah. Right.
And that's a whole different message, because the whole New Testament shows Yahusha's deity, his divinity. So you take away his divinity, he becomes another Messiah. Mm-hmm. See what I'm saying? So it is important. So, and we see here in chapter 13, it's dealing with this. It says if even people among you who are like your brother or sister or best friend, they try to turn you away to another mighty one, you're not to spare them. So we should be very thankful right now. We're in an age of favor.
Yeah, that's right.
Because a lot of these people preaching false doctrines right now in the millennium, there's not going to be any more favor. There's going to be, Yahusha's going to be commanding people to stone people. That's what's going to be happening. So, not trying to scare people right now, but this is the reality of part of his Torah had capital punishment. So something just to think about. So this is why we got to be very careful listening to people that come will say, I have a dream, I have this, I have that. Yahuwah spoke to me to do this. And I'm like, okay, but all right, we got to test what you've seen in your dream with the word. If it doesn't blend with the word, it's not from Yahuwah. And, that's what his word says. Test the spirits, 1 John 4. You don't just automatically accept it's from Yahuwah. And that's where discernment comes in. But Yahuwah even says, I'm sending them to you to test you. So Yahuwah is doing it himself sometimes to have people have false dreams. And I know that's hard to understand, but that's what's going on here. He's sending false prophets to his people, to see if they'll obey his word over what someone tells them. But anyway, go ahead, Brother Yahusha.
My comment was on something else. However, on this note, the fact that we have copies of copies, and I definitely believe there's corruptions in both the Aramaic and the Greek renewed covenant. I believe they were a lot more pro oneness before the nations got their hands on them. Just the fact that you can see that the Aramaic is more pro oneness than the Greek, and the fact that the Greek has been as a translation copied by Trinitarians, within the Vatican, because that would have been like between the 4th and the 5th century, and then the Aramaic within I believe 200 AD. And even that is in the time period where the identity of Yahushua was already beginning to be questioned and and altered. So I could definitely see that there being corruptions even in that. Just with the corruptions, you made mention, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, that we shouldn't be looking for a voice rather than just going to the word. But I can understand how some people they can study it and they can study it and they can study it and they can see the oneness, but they can see the duality, um, and they really just need Yahuwah to
Hmm.
open it up to them. In that sense, I could see the need to, yes, hold on to the scriptures and search through the scriptures, but at the same time, the need to go seek out the face of Yahuwah, because if he's the one that spoke to set apart men, and gave them the understanding that he gave them to write the renewed covenant, this same Ruach is the same, it's the same Yahuwah that taught them, that can speak that to us and give us that confirmation of who Yahusha is, um, outside of a corrupted manuscript. Not to say that you can't get the identity, should the Ruach open your eyes as you're reading it. But if you're still just having that trouble and you can't
Hmm.
make the two fit, then maybe that's the time where you put everything down and you seek his face, because he will speak to you and he will show you.
Yeah, yeah, definitely true. Definitely true. Um, yeah, what I was bringing up was just just generally to test the spirits. Just generally to test the spirits. From my experience, it's good to seek out his voice, but if his voice is telling you something that's blatantly, there's a voice telling you something that's blatantly against any version of the scriptures, then I mean, ultimately, this is our guide to his voice. His voice can't contradict our guide. So,
Yeah, and not necessarily seeking out a voice,
yeah,
because sometimes, like when he speaks, he's not going to just speak to you in a voice. Sometimes, yeah, but sometimes he's going to take you directly back to the scriptures, and something is going to stand out to you. Either that or he's going to speak through someone else, and they're going to be sharing the scriptures. You know,
yeah. So that's what I meant by that is that it's definitely beneficial to seek out his voice, but um, I'm always reminded to test the voices that are speaking to us, um, and to make sure it lines up with his word. Um, yeah, I definitely agree with you. The scriptures have been corrupted to a certain extent, um, but I would say they definitely have not been corrupted enough to the point where you can't see it. It's just that you kind of have to really go on the counsel of the whole word when you're looking into topics like that. You can't just go on one book or one chapter or one verse, or even a handful of verses. You have to look at the whole book. You have to look from Genesis to Revelation, and then you have to really look at the context of certain things, because there's certain things that seem like it's saying one thing, but it's the fact that we don't understand certain things about the Hebraic culture. We don't understand certain things about idioms and stuff like that. And I think there's like it's like a combination of things that's blinding people. It's a combination of things. So I think that's a big component too. I would say, yeah, the Aramaic is definitely a lot easier to see the oneness. Generally speaking, in any Aramaic manuscript we're talking about, whether Tanakh or Hadashah, I can go to the Targums, clearly see that the word is Yahuwah himself. It's very clear in the Targums. That's what they believe, before Yahushua even came to. So that's very obvious to me. But even just looking at the Peshitta manuscripts as well of the Tanakh, it's a lot easier to see as well. And any other type of manuscript that predates the Greek. Another thing I wanted to add to your point about the corruption thing is, well, we have to understand some of these Greek manuscripts, not all of them. Some of them are like the originals come from Gnostic sources. So that's another thing you have to understand too, is that even though the Septuagint was written in Alexandria, Egypt, later on, that library in Alexandria became a Gnostic library. So you had a lot of Gnostic scribes in that area by the time the Codex Sinaiticus came out and all that, you had Gnostic scribes, you know, putting their own little 2 cents, changing things and making it look like he's separate from the Father. So what you got to understand too is that not all Greek, even just the Greek manuscripts of the Brit Hadashah, not all of them are equal. Some are more reliable than others. So I would recommend if someone's struggling with this, try to find a Byzantine or Textus Receptus based Brit Hadashah Bible. Don't go with a Bible that's using a Westcott Hort Codex Sinaiticus based New Testament, because that's going to be the problem. Number one is that they have changed a lot of things in the New Testament to make it look like that Yahuwah and Yahusha somehow are separate beings. That's the biggest issue that I've seen is the source of whatever scripture you're reading from, and if the source itself is corrupted, then you have to pick up another Bible, and that's why I recommend to people don't ever just trust in one single Bible. That's why I say when you look into these things, you got to go into different translations. I don't ever just trust in one translation because I understand what a translation is. A translation is basically an English translator with limited amount of information about Greek and Hebrew doing their best to translate into English. And some translators are more honest than others. Some translators just are carrying tradition after tradition after tradition. And then you have these guys who find manuscripts who actually come to find out are corrupting the manuscript that they found, as is the Westcott Hort situation. They supposedly found manuscripts that are, Codex Sinaiticus Latin Vulgate based, but I don't think they just translated that stuff straight to English. Most likely they were changing things just from what they believe and how their manuscripts reflect their own belief system. They were definitely changing things. And I mean, this is not even a conspiracy theory. There's been documentaries done about this. So, that's what I would recommend for people. Just if you're feeling confused and stuff like that, I encourage obviously to pray to Yahuwah about it, like Yahusha said. But I would also say research. Do a little bit of research. Find out which manuscripts are way more trustworthy for the Brit Hadashah, because this is not like secret knowledge, guys. This has been out there for ages upon ages about these different manuscripts, and they're a couple hundred years now. It's been out about the Westcott Hort text of 1801, I think it was, when they made that manuscript. So it was a combination of a Vulgate and a Codex Sinaiticus, which most people, you even look on like blogs, most people that have studied into the Codex Sinaiticus manuscript even say that what the Westcott Hort has is extremely corrupted and has departed from the Codex Sinaiticus by a decent bit. So again, some of your Bibles trust the Westcott Hort, like the NIV, like the NLT, ESV. I'm trying to think of others. Probably the Amplified Bible, I would think, does as well. Any like modern 17, 18, 1900s Bible, they've departed from the Byzantine base. So that's going to be one of the biggest issues. And that's why I'm so pro Greek Orthodox Bibles. That's why I'm so pro those type of Bibles, because it's Byzantine based for the New Testament and it's Septuagint based for the Old Testament. So the Greek Orthodox Bibles have probably one of the better Greek manuscripts. Now, are they perfect? No, but the Byzantine base is going to be a lot more accurate than the Sinaiticus Vulgate, hybrid that Westcott Hort corrupted. Westcott and Horde corrupted. They made their own version out of the two. They also revised the heck out of it, and you guys can look that up for yourselves. You don't have to believe me for it. There's tons, like I said, tons of documentaries on YouTube about this fact, this historical fact that the Westcott Horde text is one of the most corrupted, and so-called scholars keep promoting it as the best New Testament manuscript, and it's not. I would say it's at the bottom of the list. You know, I personally believe that the two New Testament manuscripts that I really trust in a lot um, um, is the Byzantine and the Aramaic Peshitta. Those are the two. The Byzantine majority text, they call it. That's the main Greek manuscript I would trust in for the Brit Hadashah, as well as above it would be the Aramaic Peshitta. And I also do look at Syriac Peshitta as well. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on that. I think a lot of it has to do with our ignorance about manuscripts. A lot of these issues, especially this issue we just talked about, it has to do with manuscript issues. It has to do with the source that your Bible is getting its Brit Hadashah from. Anyway, go ahead, Brother Yahusha. I don't know if that's a new hand or old hand.
Old hand.
Okay, so see here. So, I mean, this is pretty much self-explanatory. Yahuwah is talking about what you're supposed to do when you find a false prophet. Also, if a brother or sister of yours or someone as a close friend is trying to lead you astray to worship other mighty ones, then he talks about, obviously, if a town's acted wickedly among your territories, what you're supposed to do. So very self-explanatory in chapter 13 there. But yeah. Okay, so I think we're at the last chapter already. Just curious, what time is it? Just curious. We're going through this stuff pretty quickly.
It's 10:05.
Well, not bad. Not bad at all. All right, so let's see here. I want to pick a new reader that hasn't had a chance to read in a while. Sister Milka, would you like to read chapter 14 for us?
Sure. Sorry, that was I was trying to find the unmute.
It's okay.
Yes, Deuteronomy 14. Ye are the children of Yahuwah. Ye shall not cut yourselves, nor make any baldness between your eyes for the dead. For you are a Kodesh people unto Yahuwah, and Yahuwah has chosen you. Oh, sorry, I should have waited. Do we have the verse up and everything? Is it good?
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, I
just went for it.
should probably put that up. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm being a little lazy today. Thanks for that. Let me just see here. Whoops. That was my page from earlier. Okay, hold on a second. Let's see here. My sword. Back up. All right. So, good. Deuteronomy 14. Just by the way, I find it interesting. My New Living Translation, in the verse that Milko just read, says mourning for the dead. So they try to make it a little bit more specific. So I just found that interesting. All right. Yep. Ready.
Okay. Ye are the children of Yahuwah. Ye shall not cut yourselves, nor make any baldness between your eyes for the dead. For you are a Kodesh people unto Yahuwah, and Yahuwah has chosen you to be a peculiar people unto himself, above all the nations that are upon the earth. Ye shall not eat any abominable thing. These are the beasts which ye shall eat: the ox, the sheep, the goat, the deer, the roebuck, and the fallow deer, and the wild goat, and the pagarg, and the wild ox, and the cameos, and every beast that parts the hoof and cleaves the cleft into two claws, and chews the cud among the beasts that ye shall eat. Nevertheless, These ye shall not eat of them that chew the cud, or of them that divide the cloven hoof, as the camel, and the hare, and the coney, for they chew the cud, but divide not the hoof. Therefore they are unclean unto you. And the swine, because it divides the hoof, yet chews not the cud, it is unclean unto you. You shall not eat of their flesh, nor touch their dead carcass. These ye shall eat of all that are in the waters. All that have fins and scales shall ye eat. And whatsoever has not fins and scales ye may not eat, it is unclean unto you. Of all clean birds ye shall eat, but these are they of which ye shall not eat: the eagle, the offspring, and the offspring, and the glede, and the kite, and the vulture after his kind, and every raven after his kind, and the owl, and the nighthawk, and the cuckoo, and the hawk after his kind, the little owl, and the great owl, and the swan, and the pelican, and the gier eagle, and the cormorant, and the stork, and the heron after her kind, and the lapwing, and the bat, and every creeping thing that flies is unclean unto you. They shall not be eaten. But of all the clean fowls ye may eat. You shall not eat of anything that dies of itself. You shall give it unto the stranger that is in your gates, that he may eat it, or you may sell it unto an alien, for you are a Kodesh people unto Yahuwah Elohika. You shall not seethe a kid in his mother's milk. You shall truly tithe all the increase of your seed that the field bring forth year by year. And you shall eat before Yahuwah in the place which he shall choose to place his name there, and the tithe of your grain, of your wine, and of your oil, and the firstlings of your herds and of your flocks, that ye may learn to fear Yahuwah always. And if the way be too long for you, so that you are not able to carry it, or if the place be too far from you, which Yahuwah shall choose to set his name there, when Yahuwah has blessed you, then shall you turn it into money and bind up the money in your hand, and shall go unto the place which Yahuwah shall choose. And you shall bestow that money for whatsoever your soul lusts after, for oxen, or for sheep, or for wine, or for strong drink, or for whatsoever your soul desires. And you shall eat there before Yahuwah, and you shall rejoice, you and your household. And the Levi that is within your gates, you shall not forsake him, for he has no part nor inheritance with you. At the end of 3 years you shall bring forth all the tithe of your increase, and same year, and shall lay it up within your gates. And the Levium, because he has no part nor inheritance with you, and the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow, which are within your gates, shall come and shall eat and be satisfied, that Yahuwah may bless them, or broke them, in all the work of your hand which you do. Praise Yahuwah.
Hallelujah. Yep. So this is like some of this stuff is like a restatement of Leviticus 11. I would recommend people that are new to this, any listeners and viewers, that this is a little new to them, or it seems like it's just glossing over something. I would recommend reading Leviticus 11 if you haven't done that before. If you've never read the laws of the unclean animals and the clean animals, I recommend you do that to understand the full context of what Sister Milka just read. Um, so obviously now I'm trying to see here, does it deal with animals that die of themselves? Does it get into that in this chapter? Oh no, it goes straight into the tithing. Okay. Oh yeah, it does. You must not eat anything that has died a natural death. You may give it to a foreigner living in your town, or you may sell it to a stranger, but do not eat it yourselves, for you are set apart people as Yahuwah your Elua, uh, as Kadash to Yahuwah your Elua. You must not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. So much confusion because of the rabbinical Judaism interpretation of that commandment.
I used to be so afraid.
That's like, yeah, I remember I talked to Ashkenazi one time, joking around. It's like, it says literally word for word in its own mother's milk, right? And he's like, oh yeah. I'm just shaking my head at him. I'm like, come on, man. It says that, and you're still holding to this whole weird halakha or whatever you want to call it, kosher standings that, you know, and there's even an argument that supposedly the context is actually talking about rituals, like pagan rituals. Like the pagans would actually not let the baby wean be weaned, and they would basically offer the young of the mother in its own mother's milk as like a sacrifice. I don't know. I think Brother Yahusha has actually studied into this concept more than me, that we actually don't realize the historical context of that commandment there, and that it's referring to like pagan rituals and stuff like that. So I would have to look it up, but I remember another brother, Zachary Bauer, talking about it one time, that the context has a lot to do with the practices of the nations, and they would do that almost as like a ritual for their gods. Let's see here. Do not shave your hair above your forehead for the dead. Uh, yeah, and we see that in other places too. Shaving yourself for the dead. That's a very big pagan practice. They would actually rip. Oh, sorry guys. They would rip their beards for the dead. They would shave their eyebrows for the dead. They would they would shave their top of their head for the dead. It was a very popular practice in Egypt and other pagan nations for them to do that. And mind you, in this context, right, Yahuwah is reminding them not to do these things because, you know, they were around these nations that did such things. So they would be tempted to do these things for the dead. Um, and all that. So a lot of those type of commandments have to do with the fact that Israel was taken out of Egypt, out of a pagan culture and society, and Yahuwah has to give them these laws like, listen, you don't do this. You're my people, you're set apart, you're not gonna mutilate yourself because of a dead relative. You're not gonna cut your arm because you're mourning for someone. And so that's kind of where the context of that comes from. And see here, it's very demonic. I mean, in modern day, people just cut themselves to cut themselves because there's spirits at work. The whole emo culture, that whole culture is like worship of the dead. Spirits, probably there's a lot of demonic spirits causing teenagers and preteens to cut their arms you know, with a razor blade. You'll see them cut their arms, cut their wrists. It's a very demonic practice. Usually there's spirits at work when that's going on. So that's what we got to understand too, is a lot of these practices Yahuwah doesn't want Israel to do. He's protecting his people. He's protecting his people. He doesn't want his people getting into demonic practices. Um, so yeah, I think other than that, obviously the tithing at the end here. Yeah, And again, the tithes had to be given at the tabernacle or the temple where he put his name. Um, and a lot of people will say, well, Doug, look at verse 24, 25. It says that if it's too far, they could sell, they could sell the animal they were given as a sacrifice and use the money to buy something. But what most people don't do is they don't read the rest of the verses here. It says, now when Yahuwah your Elua blesses you, baruchs you with a tube harvest, the place of worship he chooses for his name to be honored might be too far for you to bring the tithe. If so, you may sell the tithe portion of your crops and herds, put the money in a pouch, and go to the place where Yahuwah your Elua has chosen. When you arrive, you may use the money to buy any kind of food you want: cattle, sheep, goats, wine, or other alcoholic drink. Then the feast there in the presence of Yahuwah your Elua celebrate with your household. And do not neglect the Levites in your own town, for they will receive no allotment of land among you. Now, right there, it's showing you're still going to the temple. That's what people don't understand. What it's basically saying is if the journey's too far for you to cart your animal, what you're basically doing, guys, is they would sell the animal or the crops and still go on that journey. They would still go on that journey, but they would just have a money bag with them and they would go to the temple. So what Yahuwah is doing, he's giving allowance for people that can't be carting animals for thousands of miles. Mm-hmm. That's all that's going on there. They're still going to the temple to give their tithe. So I want to make that clear, because a lot of people have kind of taken that one verse in verse 24 and ran with it like you could give him your tithe in your own cities. Like, that's not what it's saying, though. That's not what it's saying at all. So then it talks about at the end of every third year, bring the entire tithe of that year's harvest and store it in the nearest town. Give it to the Levites, who will receive no allotment of land among you, as well as to the foreigners living among you. The orphans and the widows in your towns, so they can eat and be satisfied. Then Yahuwah your Elua will baruch you in all your work. Now, these are very specific tithes. Now, I know people are going to disagree with me about the context of the widow and the orphan and the foreigners living among you. Okay? Among you means of Israel. Okay, so even the strangers that it's talking about here, it's talking about strangers that would have joined themselves to Israel. And then it talks about the orphans and the widows in your towns. Now, even if it's talking about, let's just say I'm wrong, right? Let's just play a little bit of devil's advocate here. Let's say I'm wrong. Let's say it's talking about generally orphans and widows. It's saying orphans and widows in your towns. So even if it is non-believing orphans and widows, yeah, it's not the world. It's not the world. It's not everywhere. It's in your own towns, in your own suburbs. So, for example, if I don't have widows and orphans in my specific town I live in, that's the only orphans and widows I'm obligated to bring into the feast or give festival tithes to. You see what I'm saying? So, and I still, like I said, I still argue to this day the context of this has to be talking about of Israel, because Yahuwah doesn't have Gentiles who worship other gods keep his feasts. That's the point. If you want to keep his Torah, you got to worship him. It's a what's the word I'm looking for? No, it's a compact deal. It's a package deal. It's not like, ooh, I really like his laws, but I don't want to serve him. No. For you to even keep his Torah, you have to be in covenant with him. So when he's talking about doing this for the widows and the orphans and all that among you, it has to be talking about Israelite widows and orphans and this and that and strangers. So it's very important that we understand Yahuwah is a very specific Elua. He doesn't generalize things. And even in his Torah, he doesn't generalize things. So when we look at that in Deuteronomy 14, in that portion of the chapter when it talks about the tithes, there are festival tithes where basically you would have to go and give the festival tithes to the tabernacle or the temple to the priest to give to Yahuwah. Now, out of those festival types, out of the flock that you would kill for food and all that, you are to share with your fellow Israelites, which included the orphan, the widow, and the Levite. And we just read that in a couple chapters ago, chapter 12. So we always got, the one thing I would just want to say, brothers and sisters, keep everything in context. Everything in context. Restrict yourselves from generalizing or ecumenicalizing things, because the 80-90% of the time, the majority of Yahuwah's Torah is specifically for his people, specifically how we are to treat one another. The majority of his Torah. Now, there is some commandments that he tells us how to treat the world and all that. I'm not saying there's not. What I'm saying is the majority of the time, when you're talking about financially taking care of people or sharing in the feasts, I mean, first of all, Israel would not have a Baal worshiper at the feast. I think we all can agree with that. So that'd be kind of ridiculous for Deuteronomy 14 there to be talking about widows and orphans in general. That wouldn't even make any sense. But anyway, that's the point I'm trying to bring out, is that we always got to be careful of who is the audience, who is Yahuwah talking to with a lot of these commandments. And, you know, I mean, a lot of his Torah, it will outright say, he'll tell Masha, speak to the children of Israel, speak to the children of Israel, speak to the children of Israel. There's always an audience. There's always an audience. There's always a specific audience. The majority of the time of the Bible, the audience is never going to be all mankind. I'm just being honest with you guys. There's very few times that the audience is everyone. Very few times, because if we're going to be honest here, who did he give his law to? He gave his law to his people, right? His bride. That's who he gave the law to. Because what we got to understand is what is the relationship with Yahuwah and Israel? What happened at Mount Sinai? He married her. His laws are wedding vows. So why would he be giving wedding vows to everyone if wedding vows are only for your wife and a husband? So that's what we need to understand is, yes, the law is specifically for Israel, but that doesn't mean that the nations won't be judged on Judgment Day. I think that's where people want to do the either or thing. Like, well, if everyone's going to be judged, then it's for everyone. Not true. Because if he's only given it to Israel, he's only given it to Israel. He's only given it to his covenant people. So if you want to still worship your pagan gods, you can't keep his Torah. It's like I said, it's a package deal. So that's the point. That's the point I'm trying to make, is that just because the whole world's going to be judged for not keeping it does not mean that a Hindu worshiper can still be a Hindu worshiper and keep his Torah. That's the point I'm trying to make. If they want to worship their old gods, they can't be in covenant with him. And it's, you can't have it both ways. If you want to stay a Gentile, Gentiles are out of covenant. They don't have the promises, and they don't have the right to be keeping his Torah without being in covenant with him. What I'm trying to say is, right, faith always comes before works, right? So you doing works of his Torah and not being in faith with him is pointless.
Yeah.
You're still going to be guilty on Judgment Day doing that anyway, because you didn't have faith, because you didn't come into covenant with him. That's the point I'm trying to make. A Buddha worshiper, there's no purpose for them to keep Torah and still be a Buddha worshiper. That's the point I'm trying to make. That's right. And you see what I'm saying, Mom? So it's a basic concept. Yeah. So his Torah is connected to his covenant. To be able to have the right to keep his commandments, we have to be in covenant relationship with him, with the Alua of Israel. You can't, he's not the Alua of the whole world. That's the point. That's the point. So, again, that's just a lot of tradition we got to unlearn from the church, that, he's the Alua of the whole world, and the whole world, is his people, and, all that, and that everyone's his children, all that jazz is incorrect doctrine. So anyway, but, not trying to go on a rabbit trail, but I did anyway. But so, But I did want to explain that because I know that's the one main thing that is a confusion is when we tend to have eisegesis in us, and when we see the phrase widows, orphan, and stranger, I don't think we do it on purpose, guys, but we tend to ecumenicalize stuff like that because we'll look at like stuff from Proverbs when Proverbs is not giving you the context. By the way, Solomon is just going through stuff from the Torah.
Yeah.
He's not really giving you context. So people will look at stuff from Proverbs of itself and then build these ecumenical understandings. But what you got to understand is Solomon is not authorized to change Yahuwah's context of his commands. He can't go against that. He can't go against something that's pre-established. So, just something to think about, something to chew on. But anyway, so hopefully, hopefully you guys enjoyed the study today. Oh, that's a shame. I guess Sally lost her connection.
Aw.
So hopefully all you guys out there enjoyed the study. Hopefully it was edifying for some of you out there and you learned something. If you like this YouTube page,
I'm not getting sound. I don't know if it's just me or if it's still probably me.
I can hear you,
I'm
Doug.
gonna log out.
Brother Doug.
Okay, good. All right, yeah, it could be a connection issue.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think sometimes there's connection issues between me and another participant, so it could just be that going on. But I just want to say, if you like this page, all of you viewers and listeners out there, please, because it does this YouTube page huge help. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please click on the notification bells. And again, like I always say, for the lives, you're not going to see it on regular video tab. You have to click on the live tab. If you're not seeing it on your YouTube feed, you might have to go to the actual YouTube page of ours at Awakened by Yahuwah. Again, because the way YouTube is now, they're not putting the lives on the regular video tab. So you got to go to the live tab. So, but I really appreciate all the new subscribers we have for the past couple of years. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. All of our brothers and sisters out there, please stay tuned. Yahuwah willing, we'll be back next Shabbat. And Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat.